Welcome to the Second Press podcast, a wine-ish podcast hosted by Brad Horn and Dan Kirby.
I'd heard about this place called Plumpton College. They basically said, yeah, if you apply, you'll get in. It was like, okay, do I not need to show some sort of competency? They were like, nah. So I applied and went to Plumpton.
Hi, Dan. How are you, mate?
Should we just dive in?
How are you, Dan?
Are we in? We're in already. Yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm good. We can have like a false start introduction to episode 6 if you want.
We're fine. Episode 6. So if people are still here, thanks so much.
We're professionals. Yeah, thanks to all those people that are still listening. I think like the feedback that I've had so far, and I think the feedback you've had so far, is that people are enjoying it.
Yep.
And we want it to become like my vision for it. I don't know about you, Brad. I would like it to be like the wine trade radio show. And so that it's the sort of podcast that you can just chip into once a week, once every couple of weeks, and it's super light and breezy, and it's just a bit of the news, a bit of some nice people, and away we go. And people seem to be resonating with that, so I'm pretty happy. Yeah.
I totally agree with you. Great feedback from trade and consumers, obviously on my Instagram page, like saying, Brad, this is really good, something we need. So pretty good, mate. I think we're going to keep it up while we can.
Love it. Absolutely love it.
So episode 6, wine trade news.
Yeah, go for it. What's in the news this week?
To be honest, I've gone a bit outside the box this week with some of my news articles that I've found.
Here we go.
Food and wine. Wine isn't risk-free, but it may not be the biggest health threat on your table.
I think I read this one, but give us the overview of it, because is this the one?
Well, Kathleen Wilson.
Yeah, I know this one.
Kathleen Wilson wrote this article talking about there are bad things if you drink too much, moderation and all this, but it's processed food's worse for you. There's lots of other things that are on your table that are so much worse than a glass of wine.
Yeah, I think there's one of the quotes that I saw in this article, and it was like, there's lots of negatives for both like processed food and negatives for alcohol, but there are also proven positives for alcohol, but there are no proven positives for like cigarettes or loads of processed meats. And so I thought that was a really nice quote in there to say, look, you can balance all these things up, but actually if you reduce your intake of super processed stuff, then there's no pros there's no like pros for those things.
Yeah, basically saying, this doctor said, don't lump all drinkers together. Someone that enjoys a glass of wine with their dinner, that's absolutely fine. The relaxants, like enjoying it with food, is much worse than like obviously binge drinking, but also eating loads of processed food. So I think we've got to like stop saying that wine's bad. And I think a lot of like I've read an article that it's somewhere in France, they're saying it's not great, and like some producers are saying that doctors in France are saying don't drink anymore.
Yeah, and like the WHO, their advice is just, oh no, alcohol is safe. But I think the trade has to confidently and with data and evidence and structured sort of feedback to everyone, just like make the case for moderation and to do it properly and just push that narrative. Because I think there's a lot of internal conversations in the wine trade where we're constantly like talking about this stuff internally. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy that we will eventually sort of tell people that wine is bad. Whereas I think there has to be a handful of voices at least that say, you know what, it's not all that bad.
No, I agree. Drink a glass of wine with your dinner, guys. It's good.
Yeah. Everyone should drink a little bit more.
I totally agree. On another news item, the Metropolitan Police seized 67,000 bottles of counterfeit wine worth £500,000.
Do they? What brands or labels?
I don't have that.
Does it say?
I don't have that, but it's probably not the big labels, is it, for that many bottles of wine for that much money?
It can't be. But I'm always baffled by what the benefit of counterfeiting cheap wine is.
Yeah.
Like it confuses me. Like, a whole entire container of like fake Villa Maria. Like Villa Maria is not that expensive. Do you know, like...
Yeah, that's like £7.50 a bottle.
Yeah, it's like, what are they faking? Or is it just the health risks of faking? Like, are they you're not exactly 100% sure what's in it. Maybe
I think that's what it is, mate. I think that's what they're saying in the article itself. The food standards agency is saying it's not the wine itself, but it's what they're putting in it and what they're making it from. They don't know.
Yeah.
So obviously these are getting into supermarkets or getting into shops, and people are buying it, and no one has a clue what's in it. It could just be grape juice fermented for a bit, but it could be something else that's probably not healthy.
So in the UK, without getting too technical, they brought in this legislation a few years ago called AWRS, which is Alcohol Wholesaler Registration. And if you sell alcohol to another business, you have to be registered. And you have to go through the steps to say, I keep my booze in this specific warehouse. I've got all the documentation for it. And if I want to sell booze to another business, you have to have this registration number. And that business should be able to ask you for that number to prove that tallies up with who you say you are. And that should legitimize your wine sales or booze sales. But the sort of get around with that is that you don't need an AWRS license to sell direct to consumer. So you don't need it if you're just selling to the general public.
So from your cellar door or for you don't need it?
If you're selling to a cash and carry or another business, you need that paperwork. But if you're a small business and you're buying wine and you're selling it you want to start up a bloody wine shop website, then you don't need the AWRS license.
Okay, thanks for that, mate. I didn't know that. The last one before we head on to Chris Wilson. It's a bit of sad news. Michel Rolland has died. Enologist, famous enologist from Bordeaux.
Oh, one of the most famous.
Consultant for over 200 wineries. So basically, probably everyone's had a glass of his wine.
Definitely, because he's made some really expensive stuff, but also he's made some of the really famous big branded stuff.
Yeah.
And, he's consulted and he's advised so many people in the biz. I was in Bordeaux a few years ago and I think we did a whirlwind trip around sort of 7 or 8 wineries in a couple of days. And, probably half of them have said, oh yeah, Michel helps us make our wine or comes in and consults at harvest or so. He's prolific in terms of the amount of wineries he's worked with.
Yeah, and that's not just in France, that's around the world as well. Argentina, Australia, South Africa, everywhere I've been, it's been he's a consultant of ours, one of the foremost experts in winemaking, sort of flying winemaking, and really, really. So I've actually read the article that Peter Dean had a bit of a rewind in the bio. It's a really good read. So if anyone wants it, we'll put it in the show notes. Worth a read. Did a really good job there. Sad that he's gone.
Shall we, on a lighter note, move over to our lovely interview with Chris Wilson, English winemaker, a friend of mine and friend of my boss Ben's. So he knows me and Flint Vineyard very well. Norwich boy, which is always good. Supports Norwich City. I don't really like football, but we're both from Norwich, which I like.
You enjoyed that, mate, when he said Norwich. I saw that. I saw you perk up.
Well, I enjoyed that because we're both from Norwich, regardless of how good the team is. But yeah, good interview, fun one. A bit nerdy about wine in places, but he also had some guitar, so I was happy.
Yeah, and actually his journey into wine was really fun. So let's get into it.
Yeah, cool. Here we go.
Well, Chris, thanks for joining us, mate. Chris Wilson, winemaker at Gutton Style Winery in Cambridge. You make wine in a windmill.
That's correct, yeah.
I've got something right today, Dan, so I'm over the moon. I might go now. Bye.
Well done.
Yes.
I'm not in the mill tonight, unfortunately. I listened to your show with Henry and you hoped that I might be in the mill for this, but unfortunately it's a bit cold in there of an evening and I'll be honest, the internet's not up to whack there either.
No internet in the mill. Love that.
What is there in the mill? If there's no internet, there's no space, but you can make wine in there.
I can make wine. I've got electricity. I've got very rudimentary plumbing. That's all you need, really.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, it's perfect.
Sweet.
It's the basement of this old mill that was built in 1847. So it's got some history. You can feel it in the bones of the building. The walls are sort of 0.7 meters thick. And you'll know this, guys, that is good for keeping an ambient temperature somewhere. So it's a perfect place for maturing wine. Not so great during fermentation. I have to sort of do a few tricks to maybe warm things up now and again. But in terms of, élevage and keeping wine in barrels, it's perfect.
Why did you choose to make wine in a windmill, though? Is it just like you thought, bugger it, I'm going to give it a go, see what happens? Or you must have thought, like, this is a great place to make wine, or just for cheap rent, I'll give it a go.
It's the last one, probably. Yeah, cheap rent. Honestly, I wasn't looking for a windmill. I was looking for somewhere in the city, in Cambridge, to make wine, because I wanted to set up an urban winery here, and I'd looked at the out of city sort of retail parks with these anonymous units. We've all seen them. Perfect in lots of ways for doing stuff, probably for making wine. But they didn't have any character. They weren't close enough to the city. And then someone mentioned that there was this old windmill in Chesterton, which is 10 minutes from where I live, 10 minutes from the centre of town, that the developers were sorting the site out, and they had some units there available. And the basement, they couldn't put anyone else in there. So I said, look, this is perfect for me, because it's cold, it's damp, it's semi-underground. And it's like a perfect cellar for making wine. So that was 2020. Here we are, almost 6 years later, and things are going well.
So you make predominantly English still wines. Obviously, you do make English still wines, but what grapes do you use? Obviously, there are vineyards in Cambridgeshire, I'm guessing, but not that many. So I'm guessing you outsource some of you're getting your grapes and stuff.
Yeah, so I very much work on a negotiation basis. So okay. I don't do any of the grape growing or that side of the coin. I source grapes, predominantly Essex, which is next to Cambridge. Perfect for me, and perfect because Essex is the hotbed for still wine vineyards, and I'm talking Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, particularly here. So I'm an hour away from the Crouch Valley. Drive down there, pick the grapes up from the growers I work with, back to Cambridge. 2 hours, bish, bash, bosh, off we go.
Hey, Chris, how do you find growers in the Crouch? Do you just like personal connections or other people in the biz, or are you just sort of wandering around in a car knocking on vineyard gates?
It started off, so 2020, so we're in lockdown here, aren't we? Yeah. I move into the cellar in June. They get it ship-shape for September because I said I've got some grapes coming, but I didn't have any grapes coming. Got on the phone to Duncan McNeil, who's viticulturist based in the Crouch Valley. He's probably planted most of the vines in that part of Essex. He happened to be working with a grower at the time whose first vines were coming online that harvest, and they didn't have a taker for them. So there was a real sort of, call it what you will, serendipity, whatever. So I got down there, had a good chat with them, looked at the vineyards, and I've been working with this grower, Missing Gate Vineyard, ever since. Took Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Bacchus from them year one, and I continued to work with them with Chardonnay particularly. After the first vintage, once the wines were released and they were out there, people tasted them, people seemed to like them, and that made it a bit easier to open those doors with other growers in Essex and further afield.
Do you think some of these growers are a little bit like sort of first time you go there, standoffish? Because this is their grapes as well, and they want to make some, I'm guessing, some nice wines out of their grapes, because that will make other people want them. So, but now obviously you've made some really, really good wines, mate. I've tried a few and I do enjoy them. So has that opened a few more doors because you make good wines?
Absolutely. And, I made a point from the very beginning of saying to anyone I work with that I'll put your name on the bottle. I don't grow the grapes, and that's where it all starts. That's the genesis of the whole thing. On my labels, I will tell my customers or whoever buys the wine where the grapes come from. So it will say on the back where they're from. And I think that's really helpful to the growers. There's a little bit of ego involved, I'm sure, with some growers. They want to see their names attached to wines that are getting good scores, perhaps, or that have been well received by customers or critics, that sort of thing. So it's a sort of two-way street. It's good for them, it's good for me.
I find we work at Flint with a couple of other growers, and they're really proud when they sell their wines to someone who turns those grapes into good wines. And so not only is it good for them to have their name on the label, but they also, some of them do vineyard tours and tourism. And actually they're like, you know what, you can come and visit our vineyards and see our grapes, but they go into Chris's wine or they go into Ben's wine. It helps them a bit with their cellar door and tourism sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. It really helps. And there's some people I work with, some growers who don't even do the other. They don't even have any wine made for them by a contract producer, or they don't make it themselves. So this is all they've got in terms of, this is their only way of showing the wine is through the people like myself and, Vagabond and Black Book and the others who do things on with this sort of ideology, really.
I'm going to take a step back because obviously you mentioned your labels and they are really fun, great artwork, great names. How do you come up with those ideas? It's probably going to lead to a question a bit later on, but how do you come up with those ideas for the labels?
Well, I kind of made a rod for my own back because each wine that we release at Gutter and Stars has its own name and its own label. So we never repeat. Now, I think that's important for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we grow grapes in such a marginal climate here in England, and I'm making wines on such a small scale that each vintage is particular to that year. It has to be. And we have such vintage variation that I think each wine deserves its own name and its own label. The names are generally derived from music or literature. So we started off with I Want to Be Adored, Stone Roses track. That was my first wine, which was a Bacchus. The most recent release is a Chardonnay-based wine called Avalon, which is from Roxy Music. And there's all sorts of stuff in between. There's Evelyn Waugh, there's Too Many DJs, there's Blur, there's Gene, you name it, it's all there. And I work with a brilliant guy called Ed Wright, designer, alongside myself with the ideas and the concepts for all the labels. And we have a lot of fun doing that.
I know it's going to lead me to my next question. I'm going to veer away from wine and where you started off your career, or part of your career was you are a journalist still, but a journalist in music and writing newspapers. So how does that guy from writing in newspapers and music magazines, wine as well, get into wine? How did that happen, mate?
So my first degree was journalism, and actually I should be sitting where you guys are. I specialised in radio journalism for 2 years at university.
You haven't got a face for radio, definitely a face for TV. This face maybe, but
everyone else you've interviewed so far has got their own podcast as well. So you need to get on it.
I'll leave it to you guys. You know more than me. So I did a 3-year journalism degree back in the late 90s, showing my age a bit there. And I slipped into print journalism, so music writing. And I worked for a magazine called Jockey, Slut.
Classy.
Yeah. Dance music magazine. Worked straight out of graduation, worked for them, and then moved on to other titles and did a lot of stuff in the sort of .com sphere as things were really kicking off in the early noughties there, writing about music. Slipped into mainstream journalism, like newspaper journalism in the mid-noughties. Worked at the Daily Mirror for a number of years. That's when I sort of got interested in wine. I was out for a drink one evening after work with a friend of yours, actually, Brad, Nikki Smith. And she ordered, I was a beer drinker at the time. She said, I'm going to order some wine. I said, go on then. So she ordered some white wine. I said, this is delicious. What is it? She said, Viognier. I'd never heard of it. I was like, what is this? This opened like Pandora's box for me. What are all these flavors, these aromas? I've never encountered anything like this before. From that step onwards, I was just interested and sort of engaged.
I love that because I always have the Alice in Wonderland. You fall down that rabbit hole, and you just keep on foot. And it's that one moment, that almost like light bulb moment, whatever it is, that gets you into wine. And especially when you're like coming from that journalism angle, or want to be a winemaker, but something just goes bang. I want to learn more, and I'm going to learn however I can. Be the internet, books, listening, drinking, just diving straight in, and it is wonderful, and you can see my passion for it. But it really is when you do have that light bulb moment, mate. And Viognier was yours.
Yeah, it was at some trendy pub around the back of the old EMAP offices, just off Oxford Street, and where we'd normally drink. Continental lager was probably the drink of the day. But Nikki was like, "No, we're ordering some wine."
We
are.
Yeah.
So when you had that glass of Viognier, did you think, I love wine now, I'm going to start writing about it? Or did you have that light bulb moment to be like, I want to make this stuff? Like, did you have that like idea straight away? Or
no, I just wanted to drink more.
Lovely answer.
And then it was a case of, let's see what we can do. And, the usual, the same old route, WSET, 1, 2, whatever. Not one. No one does one, do they?
Henry Jeffries did.
Henry did.
Well, there you go. What is it? Red wine or white wine? Yeah. This kind of coincided with me being a bit strung out at work, doing a lot of sort of shift work at the Mirror. I was doing some great stuff. I was basically doing a lot of sports stuff, but not football. Anything but football. Cricket, tennis, Olympic stuff. I even interviewed some NFL people.
Yeah, big fan of NFL. Oh,
Brad.
I might have to go back and have a look at that.
Like Reggie Bush.
Oh, yeah.
LaDainian Tomlinson, these guys, back in the day.
Yeah, good.
Running backs, I think they were.
Yeah, they were running backs, mate, for the University of Miami.
There you go. So I was doing a lot of this stuff, but I was just strung out and I was getting interested in wine. So there was this point where I was like, okay, I could carry on the WSET route. I was sick of looking at maps, if I'm honest. So I'd heard about this place called Plumpton College, and I went down there on an open day with my wife. They basically said, yeah, if you apply, you'll get in. It was like, okay, do I not need to show some sort of competency? They were like, nah. So I applied and got in. That was 2010. So yeah, I'd quit journalism full-time, was still freelancing, got to pay the bills, and went to Plumpton and learned the nuts and bolts, the under the fingernail stuff, the viticulture and the enology. And it was the enology bit that really struck a chord. I don't want to ever be pruning vines, if I'm honest, that sort of thing, after those horrible winters at Plumpton. So I was very happy in the cellar. And that's where I learned, winemaking and the basics of it, certainly.
And obviously with that, you are a journalist as well in wine now. Have you obviously taken that knowledge when you go on trips and go to different countries? Do you sort of take that with you to learn more?
When I graduated 2013, my wife and I very quickly moved out of London to Cambridge. We just started a family. We needed some bit more space. Cambridge was a little bit more affordable back then. Instead of this sort of grand plan of suddenly going out with my degree and maybe going to South Africa or somewhere to make wine, we ended up in Cambridge. And it took me a while to realise that I could do what I'm doing, like I'm doing now here. And in the meantime, I was like, well, I've got my journalism and now I've got the knowledge of wine production. So I started to tap up magazines and other sort of sources to write about wine, but very much like you say, Brad, with the head on me that I understand the process. And when I'm speaking to winemakers, that really helps because, not being disrespectful or disingenuous to other journalists who haven't got that training, it's sometimes quite difficult for a winemaker if you're not on the same page in terms of the questions being asked. And I had that, so it was a real benefit for me.
And that's a benefit for the publication as well, especially if it's more trade focused. I'm guessing they because obviously people in the trade sort of know what they're talking about. They should do at least. And having someone that knows how to make wine, be it obviously from somewhere else, but should know the basics of what's going on in the cellar and what you need to, and the questions you need to ask.
Absolutely. And it just made me a bit more confident asking some of those questions as well. And especially when I'm visiting, and we've all been there, you're in a cellar somewhere in the middle of nowhere and there's lots of stuff around, and it's nice to actually know, that does that does that, I can ask a question about that, all that sort of thing.
And they can put you to work as well, which is great.
I try and visit outside of harvest for that reason. But and I'm still doing a bit of writing, which I love it. I've got it's in the blood. I was a journalist for many, many years before I got into wine, and I love it. And I still do a lot of work for the buyer. I do some work for Decanter and a few other people. I just love telling stories.
What was the first publication that gave you like a wine break?
The Observer, actually, back in the day, back in sort of 2007, 2008.
Do you remember what the article was about?
Yeah, can I dig up for the show notes?
It was to do with sustainable winemaking. Like we took going back almost 20 years.
Yeah.
It was to do with that sort of thing. Yeah.
Nice. And we're going to veer away from wine, actually, ask you a bit about your life, because we try and ask about the guests. What do you do outside of wine, mate? I know obviously you've got the windmill, you write about it as well. What do you do outside of wine?
Yeah, so I grew up in Norwich, so a big Norwich City fan. Love to ski. Just back 2 weeks ago from Austria, did a bit of skiing with some mates. I've got two, I always say young girls. One of them's 13, so not quite young anymore. But I've got two daughters, so we have a lot of fun doing stuff. Those are the main sort of hobbies and things I get up to. Pubs,
I like pubs too.
Just pubs in general as a hobby.
Pubs.
Yeah, pubs.
That's it. Anything to do with pubs.
Gigs, of course.
Gigs.
Always on the lookout for seeing music.
What was the last gig you went to?
Last gig was Suede a couple of weeks ago, Cambridge. Got the Super Furry Animals coming up in Brixton, which I'm very excited about. That'll be a good one. So yeah, I try and keep my finger on the pulse a little bit with that.
And you've got a guitar behind you, Dan. You can talk about the guitar as well, mate, please, because I know you want to. You're gagging for it.
What guitar you got, Chris?
It's a Fender acoustic, semi-acoustic.
Is it just for tinkering?
Just for tinkering.
Yeah.
Used to be in a band back in the, 2000s.
Everyone did.
Called Stroke Machine.
I want to put a compilation of all of the bad wine name bands that people have. I think we're going to pull together like a leaderboard of the worst band names.
Yeah.
We could have a poll at the end of the season, like who had the worst band name. And we'll call our outtakes that episode to be called that. I'm going to ask you another question, mate. As a winemaker, come journalist that gets to travel the world, if there was any wine from around the world you could make, what would it be?
Oh, that I could make. Well, I'm in England, so I can make like decent whites and very skinny reds. I'd like to make a red with some balls, you know. I'm not talking like overly extracted, overly full body, but just something that has that sunshine ripeness. I'm talking maybe some of those lovely Grenache, those crunchy ones you get in the Swartland in South Africa, that sort of thing. I'd love to work with grapes like that and do something like that.
As an English winemaker, you could feasibly do a Southern Hemisphere harvest.
Yeah.
But is that just too much work for a one-man band?
There is something in the pipeline. I can't go into details now. It may well involve South Africa. My mum's from South Africa, so I've got a passport, so which is very handy for this sort of endeavour.
Yeah, that is handy.
So watch this space.
Oh, that sounds exciting.
You heard it here first, hot off the press.
Yeah, that would give me the opportunity to work with grapes and ripeness levels that you just don't get here.
Flying to South Africa is a much more viable prospect.
Absolutely.
Before I let you go, Chris, I want to ask you this as well. With your journalist head on and your English winemaker hat on, what's the English wine scene like now? What do you think the future holds? We obviously had some other people on talking about it on previous episodes, but I'd like to get yours from a journalist perspective and someone that makes wine as well.
I mean, that's a big question to finish with, Brad. Bloody hell.
I love big questions, mate. Like, it's all...
Give us like the 30-second summary, yeah?
What I always say when people come to my tastings, I say, look, we're kind of world class in sparkling wine. Go south of the Thames particularly. The still producers, we're still hanging on to those coattails. We're still trying to get to that level consistently, vintage over vintage, with things like 25. I mean, I'm holding out great hopes. My wines from that year are looking very good from last year, and I think across the board everyone's secretly very optimistic about what the 25s hold. The industry as a whole, it's tricky because it's expensive. When it comes to sparkling wine, particularly traditional method, £30 plus is the kind of accepted, or it may be expected. Still, it's tricky. For an industry as a whole, I think cellar door is going to be huge in the next sort of 5 years or so in terms of turning people onto it. It's going to be tricky to get wines at the right price in the supermarkets to turn people onto English still wines. But maybe some people will do it, and good luck to them.
I think that's a great answer. And I do think, as someone not in the trade, you two both are in the English wine trade, from my point of view, I think it is cellar door. Getting people out in the English countryside. They see a vineyard, they go down there, they tell a friend, buy the wine from the cellar, like get to meet the winemaker, get to meet the grape growers. Like, I think that's so important. And I think, like, England's beautiful. Like, we've got some lovely places you can go and visit with the family as well. You can be young kids, you can take your grandparents, go out there, see the countryside, get people in the outdoors, and try some banging wine as well.
Yeah.
Like, what's not to love?
Well, that's it. I think that's the key thing. That's what I'm trying to do a little bit more. I'm trying to get people to the cellar. It's tiny. You used to come and visit, but it's you'll see it's about the size of this room I'm in now. But it's small, but you get people through the door. They can find somewhere to perch. They can have a couple of glasses of wine. If it's sunny, we'll sit outside and look up at the mill. It's a nice thing to do.
And I guess you've got that unique spot because, like, the urban wineries have a very different sort of vibe than just a breezy, sunny vineyard sort of walkabout.
Well, you can get to me from the centre of Cambridge on foot or on a bicycle in no time. You don't have to worry about driving and drinking, and you don't have to worry about getting like muddy boots and all that sort of business if it's not particularly nice. So I think it's win-win, really.
You really don't like the vineyards, do you, mate?
Doesn't like the muddy boots. Chris, final point, do you think that there'll be, on the sort of English wine industry stuff, do you think there'll be an increase in urban wineries?
Well, there has been. When I started this 2020, we had Vagabond, you had London Crew. I'm not going to name them all.
Was Black Book going?
Yeah, Black Book, Renegade. That was about it. But now you've got somewhere up in Keswick. There's Brighton. There's Birmingham. There's this guy in Stroud, Saddle Goose. They're popping up everywhere. So yeah, I think so, and I think it's a decent model because you've got your customers right on your doorstep. If you're doing it in the right sort of spot, Cambridge is perfect for this because there's people who are interested. There's quite a foodie scene here, so people don't mind. People actually enjoy experimenting and coming to find you and are very happy to take away a couple of bottles of wine that may be slightly more than they would normally pay. But hopefully they think it's worth it. And, that's, it's all part of the deal.
I agree. They should come and visit you. Try the wines because they are great. And every time we've been together, I've tried the wines and they are awesome. Like people say to me, who was making some of the best Pinot and Chardonnay, and I always say yours, but no one can get them because you've already sold out.
Yeah, you need to make more, Chris.
Well, this is the danger and the difficulty, the balancing act of making such small quantities of wine is I'm happy to sell out, It's limited release wines. They're all exclusive in terms of their artwork and names like we've talked about. So it's quite a nice thing to have, to have a little small part of something that's not going to be continued next year.
Love it. Chris, thanks so much for your time, buddy.
No worries. My pleasure.
Where can people get hold of you or hop on your website?
Gutter Stars Wine is the social media handle, and gutterandstars.co.uk is the website. Just Google it. It'll either be me or Oscar Wilde, and he's been dead for 100 years. So
he doesn't have a cellar door.
He doesn't. No,
he doesn't have a cellar door. Maybe he does.
Amazing.
Thanks,
Thank you so much, Chris.
No worries.
Really appreciate
nice
it.
Nice one.
That was a really great interview with Chris. He's a really top fella making some really, really great wines in his windmill.
Yeah. I mean, if you haven't tried Chris's wines, definitely go and check them out. I'll put the link in the show notes. But again, like really small batches of really interesting wines. And I think I was chatting to him a couple of months ago and he was saying that like 80% of his sales are D2C or something. So if you want the wines, you pretty much have to go direct. So go and check him out. Yeah.
Which is good. And he's a really good journo as well. Writes some really good articles in wine, and I'm sure some of his older stuff, I might go back and read some of it. He mentioned some NFL stuff, so I think I'm going to go back and read some of his interviews.
Cool. What have you been up to this week, Brad? You been any tastings, any events, any out and about?
Honestly, mate, really busy at the moment. I had Thorman Hunt last week. I had an interview with Stefan Auger, the Rhone winemaker. Incredible
amazing
wines.
winemaker.
Absolutely incredible wine. Really good guy as well, like really down to earth. Sort of really honed in on the soil, but was happy to have a joke. And then today I had a tasting with Gaia. They're the Gaia family, their winery in Bulgari, Kamakanda. 30 years of that project as well. So I'm going to some amazing tastings with some amazing people.
I'm very jealous of you at the moment, mate.
Sorry, mate.
You've been hitting up all the good wine tastings recently, yeah. All the good stuff.
Lucky me. What about you, pal?
Well, in terms of good wine, at home over the weekend, I had the Roederer 245, which is a bottle I had in the fridge at Christmas and then for whatever reason didn't drink. And then it was just sitting there eyeing me up. And so we just had a Sunday roast. And I was like, can I open this? And so we just had a nice bottle of champagne on a Sunday, which I highly advocate for. Just have a nice bottle of wine anytime you like.
I totally agree.
I was out and about again this week. So I mentioned on the last episode, I was heading out to Cheltenham. So it was one of my sort of brand ambassador side of my job. I was hosting an event at the Grape Escape in Cheltenham. And it's run by this guy called Ant and his wife. And they took over this property a few years ago. I think it's saying 10 or 11 years ago. And his idea was just to change the wine list. So there's like 30 wines on the wine list. And he's like, I'm just going to change it every couple of weeks, the whole wine list. And so he doesn't really have anything on like a permanent selection. And so, he just like buys sort of 24 bottles of anything and the wine list is constantly rotating.
Oh.
And so he listed a couple of our wines for this tasting and he's going to have them on the wine list for the next couple of weeks. And, when they're gone, they're gone. And so you can turn up and you can do a blind flight. And so you just, out of all the wines on his list, he puts a little star by 5 of them. And so there's 5 reds and 5 whites at any one time. And you can just pay a flat fee and do that as a flight alongside some foodie bits. But you can also pour those flights for you blind. And then you get a prize if you guessed all the grapes in the right order.
That sounds like a brilliant concept,
super,
mate.
Super nice, like chill evening. I basically ended up doing like the same, because rather than pitching it to the crowd, sometimes you do a wine tasting and you have to like ding your glass and get everyone's bloody attention and then talk to the room. And so the way that Ant likes to do things is just the winemakers just float about the space and talk to people on the things they want to learn about. So you're not like trying to hold attention for the whole room. So that was a really nice sort of concept, really nice vibe for a wine tasting, and everyone seemed to have a lovely time. So big shout out to the Grape Escape in Cheltenham.
Love it. If I'm ever in Cheltenham, I will go and visit them. It sounds like a really cool place. And I love the concept.
Yeah, it's really super cool.
Guys, as we always say, like, subscribe, tell a friend, hit us up on the socials, Substack. We're going to start giving you some quotes, some of our listeners, about their listener feedback. So next episode, the best one will be in the show, 100%.
Yeah, we definitely want some quotes and some feedback. And then me and Brad, good or bad, we can go through and take the feedback on the chin.
Yes, the second chin, not the first one.
Yeah.
Brilliant, man. Anything else or before we go? Is Easter coming up? Open a good bottle for Easter.
Yeah, do. Yeah. See what we get to.
Totally agree. Thanks, man.
Sweet.
See you in a few weeks.
I'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys.
See you later.